G'day, hi, and welcome. Alright, let's just jump into this. Alright, there we go. A little bit of Mr. Big for you. Well, today is going to be a random day because I didn't know what kind of video I wanted to make today. I was just like, well, I'm pretty much like sick and tired of talking about COVID. So I could talk to you about how blustery cold it is out there. Now I've walked around with my winter goggles on because you can't see anything because it's so freaking wintry. And that it snowed like crap the night before and can't find my vehicle and because it's buried in the snow, and my battery's been dead for 3 days, and it's in the house, and basically the plow guy took out half my woodshed, or the corner of the chicken coop with the woodshed. Yeah, so I could talk about that stuff all day. My computer's starting to sound like a nuclear reactor. I could talk about that one for a long time. I thought maybe I'll do something different. Well, different, but kind of the same that I normally do. Just thought about, I was watching Hole last night. I don't know if you guys would remember the band. The younger generation would remember it. The older generation probably would have never known about it. But it was a band called Hole, and it was basically the lead singer. Her name was Courtney Love. That was Kurt Cobain's girlfriend, wife, whatever. Now, did she kill Kurt Cobain? I don't know. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. This conspiracy theories can fly on that one. But I was watching it. That was the beginning of the grunge scene, right? Where all this new music that kind of really got dialed down quite a bit. Like grunge, I mean, it was fun and whatever. And I was never a big Nirvana fan at all. Like I liked them, but I was like, well, you got to try a little harder, guys. Mind you, they did get very popular, so who am I to judge, right? But what happened was, like, for example, like the band you just heard, Mr. Big, these guys, their music, even if you don't like that style of music, their musicianship amongst all members of that band is just phenomenal. Watch these guys live. Like, I mean, Paul Gilbert, Billy Sheehan, I don't think you could find two more virtuoso guitar and bass players out there. Like, my two favorite bass players are Billy Sheehan and Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. Why? Because these guys are so damn good. And then you get somebody like Paul Gilbert again. Guys like guitar teacher extraordinaire, guitar wizard extraordinaire. He's well appreciated. I can't say he's not as popular as I think he should be, but he's definitely amongst the people that like him. They're fanatic about his playing. If you want to hear his most heyday of ferocious guitar picking, it would be a tune from Racer X called Frenzy. Just go have a listen at that, and like that's the kind of stuff the guy was playing. It's amazing he has any fingers left. Like it's just like, as a guitar player, I can tell you that's impressive. That's impressive. That is something that you can't just easily do overnight without a lot of practice. But anyway, going from something like as challenging to play as, say, something like Frenzy to go to playing something like Nirvana or Hole or Pearl Jam or whatever, then one thing that the grunge scene did do culturally was, and I guess we'll talk a bit about culture and future, where the culture is going to go in the future and stuff like that, is one of the things the grunge scene did is it killed the fast guitar player from the 70s and 80s, particularly the 80s and the early 90s, right? So we get into the 90s and it's just like the guitar players now no longer, like, if they play a guitar solo at all, it's like a two-string guitar solo. Now, a lot of guitar players just kind of gave up on the guitar solo thing for one reason only. Not because they didn't like playing guitar solos. It's just uh, after your song would be aired on radio for a little while, they would edit the song to, obviously to save, like a radio station would save money if it didn't play the whole song. So what did they cut out of it? Usually the guitar solo, right? They jump cut the guitar solo. So they just got rid of that anyway, right? And now you really, you'd say, okay, well, you don't hear guitar solos that much anymore. Well, you do and you don't. Strangely enough, you hear more guitar solos in country now than you used to, right? Like before, it was like if there was a guitar solo, it was like a little blues-based bridge. Now you got guys like Keith Urban, who's like, he's a rock player. He's not a country guy. Like he plays fairly well on his, like in the country genre. But when you listen to his guitar playing like that, that's like Joe Satriani type. Maybe he's not at the level of Joe Satriani, but he's playing that kind of style. Like he's playing as a modern guitar player, not a blues guitar player. So you get some of these pretty good guitar players, that are respectable, and they're holding back a lot on a lot of the music they play because their music doesn't call for that kind of razzle dazzle. Not every song has to be like frenzy, you know what I mean? But then, like I say, in the 90s, it was really a thing to just like, dumb down the guitar. Like just go back to basic bar chords, no riffs, just, maybe the odd riff, but, like Led Zeppelin, like Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page was an excellent guitar player. He was very precise. Where Jimi Hendrix was really creative and everything like that. One thing you found with Jimmy Page was he was king of the riffs, and then the power riffs would be Tony Iommi, right? Tony Iommi, or, I mean, it's debatable whether Jimmy Page or Tony Iommi would be considered the first metal rock guitar player. Not because, like, you could clearly say that, Jimmy Page was still in the blues era, right? He was still doing that, but he was doing some pretty wicked guitar solos. Same with Eric Clapton and stuff like that, but you might give it to Jimmy Page, right? But you knew when you heard Tony Iommi, you were hearing the birth of heavy metal. Like there was no Black Sabbath is kind of like the first heavy metal. And like I say, when we get to the 90s, like everybody's just playing big bar chords instead of like all these really fancy augmented riffs and guys like George Lynch and Randy Rhoads, Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, all those like kind of real razzle dazzle stuff was kind of going away, and not to mention other guitar players. And so as that vibrance of guitar players kind of changed into more guys like chopping off all their hair, and then anybody could be in a band, right? So that was one thing about being in a band in the 70s, 80s, and stuff like that, was that almost everybody had long hair, right? Whether you liked it or didn't, it doesn't really matter. But a guy with short hair, even if he was an immaculate guitar player, would probably have a hard time getting into a band in the 80s or 90s if he didn't fit the image, right? In the 90s, everybody either had wavy hair or basically short hair, right? So it didn't matter what you looked like. And the whole grunge thing was it didn't matter what you looked like, right? You could look like a street bum as long as you played, right? So that was one good thing. It made it accessible to everybody. But I was listening to one of the things I remember the first time I heard Nirvana play the album, the Nevermind album. I think there's been recently a big controversy about the baby on the, baby on the cover of the album. I don't know who the baby was, but I don't know if they got sued or what the deal was. I don't really follow that stuff that much, strangely enough, even though we're talking about it now. But I remember my buddy bought the tape cassette. He says, "Hey, Reg, let's listen to this. This is it." We'd already heard "Smell Like Teen Spirit" on the Much Music and MTV and stuff like that, back when they used to play music and not brainwashing everybody. And we listened to the whole album, and I was like, the guitars are out of tune. Like as a guitar player, I mean, we spend a lot of time tuning our guitars. Like we go on stage, we try to make sure our guitars are completely in tune, because when they're out of tune, like even if it's out of tune a little bit, it feels like it's way out of tune, right? So you go out of your way to make sure the guitars are in tune. And then I was like, yeah. And my buddy's like, yeah, the guitars are out of tune on that one. You know what I mean? Like it was weird. And we're like, did they not care? Like you'd think they would have caught that in the studio. You know what I mean? Like it sounded good. Like they were just slightly out of tune, not enough to say that they were way out of tune, but it was just enough, you know. And I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, okay, these guys just don't care. And I remember Kurt Cobain talking about that, like that he wanted to make sure the guitars were perfectly tuned when they were recording, but the record executive was like, no, no, keep them slightly. They wanted them to sound like a garage band, like a teenage garage band that was half-assed, you know. That's why you probably and I noticed this with when I was watching, like Courtney Love playing, like a little concert, whatever that I was watching last night for the making of this video, that they're much better live. Most of the grunge bands were much better live. Now, mind you, Pearl Jam did tune their guitars when they recorded. At least they did that. But they still, they still played the more kind of, keep it simple kind of stuff. It was still good. Like, I mean, all the music was still good. It was no longer like, really challenging. Like, it was something that anybody could play. Green Day was the same thing, but Green Day was more of a punk band, right? And stuff like that. The grunge bands weren't really necessarily punk, but they were punk-ish. Like they were grungy, right? And so I'm watching her play there, the band Hole play, and the band's called Hole, and I'm watching them play, and I'm like, okay, it's 90s recording, the recording is not the best, but you could tell that it probably would have been a good sounding concert. And she's like, okay, she's doing all the screaming and yelling and, that you would get, and stuff like that out of the grunge music, which I guess was kind of like the precursor to screamo becoming popular, right? It went grunge and then that screamo stuff, and the screamo stuff, I just couldn't get into that at all. It was just like, it was a little bit too melodramatic for me, I guess. Um, and I was listening, and I was like, okay, you could tell that like the screaming that they do live is very controlled and it's very well rehearsed and everything like that. And it actually sounded good. I'm like, these people are better live than they are on the album. So they made the albums sound crappy on purpose to make them sound like they were amateurish, right? And that was the new wave. But it was also stuff that, would kind of, I think now it's gone completely full circle. We're back to, uh, more advanced playing again. There's still that kind of holdover grunge stuff, but the grunge is kind of like the simplicity you had in like the 1950s guitar playing. Like the really simple stuff, like 3-chord rock kind of stuff, is kind of what the grunge era kind of was like. But now we're in a different era where I'm saying this now is that I think in about say 10, 15 years, standard A440 guitar tuning is going to be, or standard E tuning, whichever you want to refer to it as, is going to be a thing of the past, where people are now doing all these drop tunings and stuff like that. For example, I'm not going to make this whole video about guitars and stuff like that, but one of the things I notice, I notice is like the adaptation of like 7 strings and 8 strings. Pretty much all metal guitar players now are going that way. You know what I mean? I've been hunting down, trying to get a good 7-string guitar now for a little while. I called Sweetwater Music yesterday to see if they ship to Canada. They do, but by the time I figured everything out there, it was like, okay, it would be way too expensive to get that 7-string across the border. And with everything going on, it might not get here, right? I just don't want a guitar sitting in the middle of January, sitting at customs in a cold warehouse somewhere. It would be all screwed up by the time you get it. But yeah, all these different tunings. So not only are the tunings different, the other thing I like doing is watching reaction videos to songs. Like, so of course, songs I grew up with, the songs, a lot of those songs get what do you call it, reaction videos. And one of the things that I watched, I guess the lady was just off the boat from Africa or type of thing, and there was this white dude, I guess it was her boyfriend or husband or whatever, metalhead guy, and he's letting her listen to like Devin Townsend for the first time, and a song called Grace. If you haven't heard that song, here's what I'm going to recommend: headphones on, full blast, lights out, big screen. Enjoy. It is an epic song. It really is. And if that was your first introductory to heavy metal, I mean, wow. Like I thought the girl's head was going to explode. She was like so overwhelmed with the sounds. Like it was just like, you got the choir singing. It was just like, it's a brilliant song, right? And then watching her react to Nightwish's Phantom of the Opera, which I still think to this day is the best version. One of the original versions. Well, the original, I think it's Andrew Lloyd Webber that did that one. I remember when that Phantom of the Opera came out, like it was all the rage, and I seen a play of it, and like that's something you don't really see that much anymore. Well, especially now, but is like when I was going to school, it wasn't uncommon for our school to go to another school and see a play. We saw the Wizard of Oz that way, where everybody sat along the wall of the gymnasium, and this other school, basically the center of the gymnasium was kind of like the stage. They didn't actually do it on the stage, and it was kind of like you were immersed in the play. It was really really cool the way they did it. And it was the Wizard of Oz, and it was just like the Wizard of Oz has been around for such a long time, and it's a good play, right? But then I remember. The Phantom of the Opera, it was like it went on tour, and a lot of people obviously couldn't afford, the premium prices of the tickets to go see that, and it was always sold out. So a lot of schools attempted to do the Phantom of the Opera. The problem is Phantom of the Opera is not something that a rookie can do easily. I mean, especially it all comes down. The whole Phantom of the Opera comes down to one note, one single note that has to be sustained for the actual song Phantom of the Opera. That last note that the lady sings, where he's yelling, "Sing to me, my angel," of music. Yeah, when he's yelling that, and she's singing this incredibly high note, and she hits that very last. I think it's a high C sharp, and it's like it blows your mind because like you can shatter glass with that note if you do it right. And it's like that's like expert level after like beyond expert. It's kind of like the getting back to Paul Gilbert there with the Racer X in that song Frenzy. It's kind of like that. Not everybody can do that, right? It's very impressive. Like spinning on your head, very very impressive. uh, I would say that when we went to stuff like that, it was all not only culturally enriching, it was very a real experience. It wasn't looking at a screen. It was there is the people in real time doing their thing. That's why I've always liked live music more than like recorded music. And even when I watch YouTube, I usually look for the live version of a song before the best version of like if you find a song that you really like, you always try to find the best version of it live, right? And I find that really does it for me. It's like that's cool. You know what I mean? That's really cool because it brings the experience more real. And I think because we don't socialize like we used to, and the younger generations, I mean, that's something that we're going to have to work out fairly soon, because younger generations are being so disenfranchised. Like they don't know if they're coming or going. You got all kinds of weird things in their heads. You've got teenage girls cutting their breasts off because they want to be boys. You got boys having their their nuts and everything cut off because they want to be girls, because somebody's brainwashing them before they even have the ability to fully develop their brain and think for themselves. You know what I mean? And that's very scary. That's very scary. Like what kind of culture can you have when your entire culture, maybe it's always been that way. It does appear that the culture, no matter what genre or era we are in, everything seems to have been controlled to a good degree. But I do believe the further back you go, the more organic it does get. Like, for example, you go to the 1940s, the music of the 1940s probably wasn't as controlled as it is today, obviously, right? And when you get into the 50s, same thing. Okay, the rock and roll was probably nurtured by, the social engineers of the time, but it still was pretty pure in its form. Like, it wasn't something that was going to revolutionize society into chaos, right? Now, when you look at like history, culture, everything like that, you will see if you will spot it from either generation to generation, where you'll find like the parallel. And one thing I noticed when I was watching whole play is like, okay, Courtney Love, the way she was kind of a bit of a skank. She was a drug addict and everything like that. Most of the Hollywood crowd in the 90s, like, it's amazing how many of them were drug addicts, right? Probably still the same. Um, and I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the songs in the 90s were sung about drug addicts, like, either recovering drug addicts or people that died of drugs or, partying with drugs. Like, it was very, it was different than the 60s drugs. You know what I mean? Like, this was like, the 60s drugs were like biker, like, singing about being, spaced out, zoning out and whatever. But the 90s was, taught, basically singing about death, people dying of heroin and stuff like that. And now we got fentanyl, right? So fentanyl's the new heroin, right? And that's killing our society. Now, the thing is that when you realize like some of these people, like, they're just train wrecks, and stuff like that. And even Elvis Presley had his problems. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he drugs is what really got him. You know what I mean? Um, when you look at it, but like, I mean, with Elvis, like, I mean, he kept it hidden. Like, like, what I mean? Like, he tried to hide it, right? Whereas by the time you get to the 90s, from the 50s to the 90s, even the 70s, like, it was just like the 70s, like, it wasn't toted that they were doing it, right, as much. They would sing about it, but not as much. Like, some bands would sing about it, but not as much, right? Also, wasn't allowed on the radios and stuff like that. But culturally, you could say that when you listened to it, you knew the underline of it, but it wasn't. Most people would not be able to relate to it. You know what I mean? And by the time you get to the 90s, everybody knew somebody. Right now in the 2000s, it's even worse, right? Um, so if you looked at, say, who would be the biggest, some of the biggest superstars now, well, you could say, like, say, Miley Cyrus. Okay, now Miley Cyrus is a very talented singer. Like, I watched some of her stuff, and she's actually really good, especially when she does cover tunes. She's really good. Like, you can tell she's mentally ill. Like, that part you can tell right away. Just by the sound of her voice, you know she's mentally ill. Like, there's that voice that people that have like bipolar or schizophrenia, there's a voice that they have, and it's a weird thing, because like, as soon as I hear it, I was like, oh, I bet you they have mental health issues, and 9 times out of 10 I'm right. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's just the way the brain wires. Their voice changes. Like, it's almost unrecognizable from when they're normal, and you can hear it. It's a bit of a husk, particularly with the females. It's a bit of a husk in the voice, and usually the more husky you hear, the more off the deep end they are. But maybe that's just also from drugs and stuff. Now, I don't know how whacked out on drugs Miley Cyrus is. I don't think she's that much of a drug addict. I think she's just more of a mental case. Like, I'm not saying it to be mean to her or anything like that. She is a very talented artist. Like, she can sing very good. Now, I know what some people are going to say, Reg, the Illuminati stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much all of Hollywood. They're all Illuminati. Like, I don't know how many of them are buying it hook, line, and sinker. Now they just, well, it'll get some buzz and whatever. And how many are like, like, they don't even realize it, right? And then, there's everything's a conspiracy too, right? So, but anyway, when you listen to the talent side of it, it's like, there's actually a lot of talent there. There's actually a lot of talent there. So I'm like, well, why does everything have to look like such a train wreck when it can, like, from one angle to the next, it could be really, really good. You know what I mean? And here's the thing I noticed with Courtney Love. It was the same thing. She was a train wreck, but like on stage, when you watch her, it's like she's kind of the precursor to like a Miley Cyrus. She really was. Like, she was a train wreck. She had, lots of raw talent, and everything like that. But the problem was is that it, the craziness, right? Now with Courtney Love, I don't think she was bipolar or anything like that. But I think it was the drugs, right? Like, she, shoot up and then, trash the place, right? Typical thing drug addicts do, right? So like, so when I looked at it, it's like, and then of course when you look at the slight vileness of her attitude and stuff like that, talking about Courtney Love, you could see how it would translate. Like, you don't see it back then, but now you can see, okay, well, that would be a precursor as an influence to a younger girl or guy or whatever, girls and guys would be influenced by this, and they would take it to the next step, right? Which would be whatever it would be. So from Courtney Love, it's kind of trashy and sleazy, uh, and then when you get to Miley Cyrus, it's completely hypersexualized, right? So you can see how it follows suit. So what, like, we're gonna look back maybe in 20 years, look back on Miley Cyrus and say, wow, she was had it together so much better than the new Miley Cyrus type of thing, because it's going to evolve into something even more shit show, right? So again, you can get the talent in there, but the talent is nurtured into the wrong direction. Like, again, how do you go from Hannah Montana to Miley, to the way Miley Cyrus is now? I know Hannah Montana was a character, but you know what I mean, like that sweet and wholesome to this complete degenerate, right? And again, I'm not trash talking. I'm just saying that, like, it is what it is. Like, you can't not notice it, right? And is it just an evolutionary thing, or is it just the way it's nurtured? Like, for example, if Courtney Love was a gospel singer, you know what I mean? Like, would we have even noticed her? You know what I mean? Maybe if she would have used her talents to mainstream gospel. Just as same with Miley Cyrus. What if she started doing all kinds of church, and she does do some church stuff. That's the strange part about it. Um, what if she really started promoting that? You know, but you would still have to have, uh, like the industry would still have to promote that, right? So I think that's where we're going. Is just like, it's whatever the industry promotes. They find the raw talent, and then they just throw whatever mud on the talent to promote, right? And I'm thinking, well, how much better would they be if they were nurtured into, the right-hand path of culture rather than the left-hand path of culture? Would be interesting, wouldn't it? So going forward, like the kids going forward, like, what are they listening to now? Like, almost everything is about depression and weakness. There was a song I heard, and it's called "I'm Weak." Now, mind you, when you listen to the lyrics itself, it's about a guy basically, saying how, like, kind of like, I didn't want to go out tonight, but I was weak. I didn't want to chase that girl around, but I was weak. So it wasn't kind of like I'm weak and worthless, but when you listen to it, it has that really passive soy boy kind of thing to it. So again, where does that evolve to the next, like, in a generation or two, right? So we can look at stuff how it's evolving, and right now we have like the most stringently controlled culture we've ever seen, worldwide, particularly in the West, um, where the pop culture is completely top down. Like, there's almost no bottom up, but anywhere you do see like a grassroots thing, it's always so much more pure and organic, and it's usually always better. Like, we're getting to the point where there's only like a handful of stars that you're really, you know what I mean? Like, you don't see the big mega stars you used to see. Now everything's kind of more flash in the pan. Like, okay, they're really big today, and then they have two hits, and then you never hear from them again. And it's kind of weird. You know what I mean? So the thing is that most of the songs are getting harpooned by woke culture. So you don't have people singing songs about really stuff that's like relevant even in their lives. Just they're just singing whatever's handed to them. So you got to wonder about that, because I mean, most musicians, like almost, I can guarantee you, probably past anything past say 1970, almost any star that is your favorite star and your favorite song, I can almost guarantee somebody else wrote that song for them. Like that's usually how it works. Very few artists actually write their own songs, especially nowadays, because again, it's the cookie cutter mold thing that they're going into, but they're molding it into something really very, very uninspiring, aren't they? Um, so I don't know how much more I got to say here, but I figured it'd just be a quick little video of where's culture going to go. Um, I do believe when you start looking at like some of the stuff that's a little off the beaten path, it does look a lot more optimistic. For example, if we go back to the days of Mozart and Beethoven and stuff like that, um, those eras are gone. And the thing part that's gone is not that it's classical music that's gone. What's gone is the melodies, right? But one thing I notice is when I listen to, like, say, somebody like Devin Townsend. Now, Devin Townsend, maybe you'll like the music, maybe you won't. But when you watch his shows are epic, right? And there's my favorite Devin Townsend stuff is with uh, probably going to butcher her name, but Annika Rasbergen, something like that. I don't know. It's a Dutch name or something like that. But anyway, that lady's vocals is incredible. Now, when you listen to them both sing together, they sing in perfect harmonies and that, and it's all metal, right? So it's heavy, heavy stuff. But one thing I really like is that it's like there's so much melody. You know what I mean? Like it is modern classical music. It's just it's really, really heavy and it's in a drop tuning, right? Uh, like if you listen to like the really heavy stuff, like it is very inspiring because it gets you going. Even if the lyrics might be some dark on some of the stuff. That was one thing I did notice in like the early 90s and late 80s and early 90s is with the metal bands and stuff like that was how deep the lyrics actually were. Like for example, Metallica was singing about war and stuff like that, singing about suicides and singing like singing about really heavy topics, right? So was Megadeth and stuff like that. Most of the party rock bands, their songs did, still stand the test of time. People still like them. But the songs that did the best overall were the stuff that hit people, struck a nerve because they came from a place of realness, whether it was dark or, lighthearted or whatever. It was always something that really strikes a heart with the people at the time. So culturally, I think going forward, the people that are going to be the most successful culturally and influence the most are going to be people that can resonate with what's going on in our times right now. So the kids today are going to grow up with songs that are either going to be by LGBTQP XYZ stuff, and if they can't relate to that, it's not going to be anything. But they might relate to somebody singing about the lockdowns and the isolation. They're going to sing, so it's going to be dark. There's no doubt about that. But they're going to probably relate to it 30 years down the road, and then they'll say, they'll take it somewhere else. So kind of interesting. Thought it'd be an interesting topic-ish to kind of just randomly jump into. We never do know what's coming around the corner 100%. But I do know, like, there's going to be, I think, people singing about, maybe not just like hope and love, but there's going to be a positive message coming out because I think we've done enough of the nihilism to death for like 10 lifetimes. So I do think there, like, fear not, there's going to be some nice stuff coming down the pike culturally. But it's going to be wacky. It's going to be probably like just, like a double-edged sword. Either it's going to be really inspiring and great, or it's going to be just like really like black pilling and and nihilistic, right? I think we're just stuck in that polarized world probably for the next couple of decades. We'll see where we end up. So anyway, I'm going to leave it about that because I don't really have a lot else to say about it. If you like this kind of content, all my links are down below to help support the channel if you'd like. My new blogger link is down below as well. Make sure you go and check out my professional Canadian beaver walker channel link. Subscribe there. There's a lot of good stuff over there. there's some prepping stuff, there's a lot of music stuff, there's a little bit of everything, day in the life of, there's some trapping videos, there's a little bit of everything over there, some guitar stuff, some photography stuff, and get your mind off the serious stuff. And one last thing I'll say about it is, like, in order for culture to go forward, you need to pick up hobbies and stuff. If you want to get in on a part of that, you got to start to contribute in a creative way. Whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts, whatever it is, jump in on it. Why not, right? Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day.